And welcome on in, everybody. So, without further ado, I am going to be ranking Disney Pixar movies, a couple of Pixar movies as well, but in general, the Pixar universe of movies here in Tier Maker. Without further ado, let's go right into this. Lightyear. I was actually a big fan of Lightyear. I didn't like that Chris Evans, of all people, was Lightyear, but the story was amazing. I remember seeing it in theaters. It was touching, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in B. Could have been better, definitely could have been worse. So here we go. And Soul. Soul I like because it told a really nice story of a young student who is really interested in learning more about music. And I liked it quite a bit, so we're going to go ahead and put it in B. Turning Red. I never really got the interest in this movie. I like the idea, the platonic idea of it, but it just never really hit home for me. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier. I don't feel like they delivered it very well. Luca. Luca was an interesting movie. I would put it in C because I feel like it could have been better in certain aspects. But yeah, see, I haven't seen it in its entirety either, so I'm not gonna say I can do a completely fair judgment on that movie. Toy Story 4. I felt this was pretty redundant of a movie to exist, and I hated the ending of it. It's a rare movie where I really just didn't like the ending whatsoever. I'm gonna put it in D tier. I like some of the parts of Toy Story 4, like the little road trip they went on, but overall, no thank you. Onward, again, it didn't really hit home for me. I watched it over the pandemic, and it never really hit for me. I like the story of bonding with your family, but that's also a pretty basic plot line. I am going to put it in C. No, I'm going to go D tier. It could have been so much better. Brave? This movie gets a lot of flack, but I was a pretty big fan of it for a while, and it's looking back, it's not that great as I once thought it was, but it scared me when I was younger, and honestly, based on that reason alone, I really liked it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in B. Toy Story 3. I feel like coming off of how great Toy Story 2 was, Toy Story 3 was probably going to be worse from the get-go, and it was. But it was still a solid film. You know, it showed a new chapter in the toys' lives, which is interesting. It was kind of a nice build-off from Toy Story 2. I'm going to put it in, I feel like it's better than C. It's probably B tier for me. Toy Story 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in S tier right away. It is comfortably my favorite Disney Pixar film because it just has so much going on within the movie, and I love the character of Al. He's a great villain, even though it doesn't seem like it. He's a perfect villain for that kind of movie, and it's one of the movies that I could watch on repeat for really my entire life. We're going to go ahead and put Toy Story 2 in S tier. Now we have Coco, one of the most touching Disney Pixar films, and I honestly, if I'm honest with you guys, I've never seen the entire film. I don't know how, but I just haven't. But I did like what I saw with Coco. We're going to put it in A because I love the idea of music that Disney and Pixar have been pushing here with Soul and Coco. Inside Out. I loved Inside Out when it came out in 2015, and I still really like it today. So, Inside Out, I love Bing Bong so much. He was a great character. The way he went out in the movie was so disheartening, but it was the right thing to do. And I'm gonna put Inside Out in A tier. Monsters Inc. I loved Monsters Inc. because it's sorry, it's another one of those childhood movies that I just couldn't stop watching when I was younger. And this one, oh my gosh, reiterating the story of Boo and Sully, how they bonded together throughout the movie, so touching. And then the character arc of Mike as well. Mike changed so much throughout the course of this movie. He was a stoic asshole in the beginning of the movie towards Boo and Sully and the dynamic they wanted to have, and that really changed throughout the course. He ended up being the one that saved Sully and Boo's relationship. So I'm gonna put this. I'm debating S and A. I'm gonna go S. I'm gonna go S tier for Monsters Inc. here. Wally, this one I really liked, and it was very representative of the world that we are heading into today. 15 years later, I think this was made in 2008, and it's still really relevant in today's world. So I'm going to put it in A tier. I feel like it could have been a little bit better in aspects, or maybe just the fact that I think Toy Story 2 and Monsters Inc. are so well put together. Incredibles 2. Now, initially when I saw this in theaters, I was blown away, but then I went back and I watched the original Incredibles, and I was like, they really made some major plot holes, and there was a lot of inconsistencies throughout both movies. and that kind of brought Incredibles 2 down a peg for me. I still really like the movie in general, but it could not compare to the original Incredibles. I'm going to put it in B tier. B tier for me. A Bug's Life, one of the original Pixar films, and it was a really good one. I always felt like Bug's Life and Ants were almost rip-offs of each other. They were very similar. I don't remember many. It's probably a basic thing to say, and it's not very educated, but I don't feel like Ants and Bug's Life were all that different. I'm gonna put Bug's Life in. I'm gonna go A tier. I liked A tier. This one here. So we're gonna go Cars 3. I mean, Cars 2 enough was already enough of the Cars sequels. I feel like it wrapped itself up well with the first Cars movie, but they decided to go again and make a Cars 2 and 3. Cars 3 here, with Cruz Ramirez, I think was her name. It was a little bit of a forgettable movie, but it was definitely a step up from Cars 2. But it wasn't necessary, so I'm gonna go C tier, Cars 3. Cars right here. This is just the first Cars. Cars, I want to say A. I feel like there's just a level of unbelievable amazingness that comes with Toy Story 2 and Monsters Inc. But Cars is up there. I feel like it's still a step down from those two. Lightning McQueen's arc, he went through a good change, a really good change throughout the course of his, Cars career. At least in the first movie, he did. The Good Dinosaur. It's a basic plot line, I feel like, but the animation was so incredible, and the story it told was something we've seen in so many other Pixar films. It didn't quite get there for me. I did like the animation though, so I'm gonna put it in C tier. Ratatouille. This is probably going in A tier because it's a very unique story. Most of Disney Pixar films are based on what if this thing had feelings. Toy Story is what if toys had feelings. Monsters is what if monsters had feelings. Inside Out, what if feelings had feelings. Ratatouille, it's almost basically like what if a rat had feelings. But this one is really good because of the cooking and the story it goes behind the scenes with restaurants, and it was really interesting to see Linguini, the way he kind of moved up the ladder, and it was never really him doing all the work. It was a rat. Obviously, that's literally how I'm ranking it. Anyways, The Incredibles. This is another S tier. It took you on so many different whirlwinds throughout the movie that it really never let you be bored with the movie. And that's something that cannot be understated with tier ranking movies. You have to be entertained throughout the entire movie. Otherwise, it might not always hit home for you. In Incredibles, it keeps you entertained. From one twist to another, it was so good. My personal favorite scene is when he gets into Syndrome's little computer lab, I guess you would call it. And he sees all the superheroes that have been terminated. And that scene with the Chronos Unveiled music, oh my gosh. S tier type stuff right there. And so that's why we're putting it in S tier. Cars 2, you know, it was completely unnecessary, but I feel like it gets way overhated. Yes, it was a stupid, absolutely unbelievably stupid premise of a movie, but I feel like beyond that, if you can look past that somehow, it was okay. It was an okay watch. And the villain was pretty freaking stupid. Miles Axelrod. I mean, it was so unnecessary, but I'm gonna put it in D. I don't feel like there's any true F tier Disney Pixar films. I could be wrong on that, but this is an opinionated rating. Anyways, Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo. Marlin was such a bad father to Nemo, and I can't state that enough. He was a terrible parent, and I did end up liking the story that this one told as well, because Nemo really learned a lot about how you need to be able to trust your parents some and trust your elders and not swim off into absolute nothingness, the abyss that he swam up into and ended up being taken away. And it ended up telling a pretty cool story. I'm going to go A tier for Finding Nemo. Finding Dory. It was a little bit unnecessary, but I can understand where they were coming from. We wanted to find out Dory's origins because she kind of just appeared out of nowhere in Finding Nemo. And I remember watching this back in 2016. I would come home after swimming at the pool, and we would sit down and watch this as a family. It never really hit home for me after I started watching it more and more. But I'm going to put it in B tier because I do feel like the addition of, the premise where they were at that the SeaWorld, I really liked that scene. Most of the movie took place there, and I really loved it. Monsters University. Honestly, I think it might be better than Monsters Inc., but I've already got Inc. in S tier, but I'm going to put Monsters University in S tier as well. Such an amazing franchise of movies, and I'm glad they haven't extended past it because you don't need a prequel. Well, you needed a prequel because Monsters University is literally a prequel, but you don't need a sequel to Monsters Inc. because it tells you what it needs to tell you, and that's that. And Monsters University tells us the story of how Mike and Sully met. And I feel like that's something that you need to know when you're learning about Sully and Mike, of course. And then the original Toy Story. Honestly, I'm going to get a little flack for this, but I might put it in A tier. That's going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but let me explain. And it's all opinionated, of course, but Toy Story 2, and I'm getting sidetracked here, I'm trying to talk about Toy Story, but Toy Story 2 was such a well put together film that I felt was one of the greatest Disney Pixar films ever made. And Toy Story, I won't say it didn't live up to that because obviously it came before, but it's a little bit step behind. Maybe it's the animation being almost 30 years old now. Maybe it's, and I loved Woody's arc throughout Toy Story. He learned to accept Buzz as one of their own finally by the end, and they lived a pretty happy life after that. So I'm gonna put it in A. I just feel like this top shelf of movies is on another level. I'm gonna get flack for having Monsters University and Toy Story here mixed up, but so be it. Up, you know, Up, the beginning was so moving and not necessarily inspirational, but it really makes you think about you can't take things in life for granted, and you have to do the things that make you happy in order to be happy and live a successful life. And that's the story I feel like it told. It told you that, so I want to put it in S. I think I'm going to do S tier for Up, but I feel like that's way too many movies in S tier as well. So, well, Disney and Pixar, they've made some really good films over the years. So I think S tier is fair for Up. So yeah, overall, I feel like this is a pretty fair list. You got what's typically considered the top tier of movies right here, right? S tier. Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Ratatouille, Incredibles, Monsters University, and Up. You can throw in Toy Story there, and I'm totally fine with that. And then A tier, Coco, Inside Out, Wall-E, A Bug's Life, Cars, and Finding Nemo. All of these could be considered for A tier in my opinion. And then after that, you really get into some of the more obscure movies. Lightyear might be a little bit high, but I liked Lightyear despite the fact that Chris Evans was was voicing Buzz instead of Tim Allen. And then Soul, I really liked it again. And the rest of these, Toy Story 3, Incredibles 2, some of the sequels are so redundant and prequels you just don't need them. Like Incredibles 2, I feel like it wrapped it up. It could have been a one story film. And Incredibles 2, I'm going to harp back on that a bit. The way it focused almost primarily on Helen, and Bob Parr had such a negative character arc that I almost didn't like watching the film because of the arc that Bob Parr did have. I did like the film. It could have been so much better. It wasn't necessary, but they made it anyways. Same thing can be said for Finding Dory. So yeah, B tier, it's okay. These are the okay movies. C tier, they were mostly unnecessary and pretty generic based plots. So I think that's fair. And then D tier, the movies that really didn't matter. I feel like Toy Story 4 could be C tier, but yeah. You know what? Cars 2 is probably going in F. It was so unnecessary. And now that I think about it, the movie was so fucking stupid. Sorry for cursing if you're watching. But yeah, that's the list. Thank y'all for listening. You have a great day.